Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we are again. Good morning or good afternoon. This episode, we've got somebody very special, somebody who's created something that I'm sure a lot of you are going to be interested in. And we have Moritz Claussen. I hope I've pronounced the name correct, Moritz.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much, near as possible.
As close as possible, yeah. I think it's German pronunciation, but that's good enough.
Yeah, my Deutsch is nicht sehr gut.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, so Moritz, if you can just please explain a little bit. Obviously, we know that you're the managing director and co-founder of cargo.one, but if you can just give us a little bit about your background and obviously that innovative flair that you have. So over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. So a bit about myself. 3 years ago, we came to the industry, to the air cargo industry, as newbies, really, back then. All three of us, my two co-founders, Oliver and myself, have a background in building technology companies. We've always done this. All our careers have revolved around building companies from the ground, essentially, that have some kind of technology as their core to help industries develop. And so that's what we've been doing. Prior to cargo.one, we were working in the financial space, processing payouts here in Berlin. And I'm very happy to have made it to the air cargo industry.
Well done and welcome, my friend. I'm not sure how many people would say that now, reflecting back over whatever length of career. But well done you. Now, can you just briefly explain what the company does? Okay, how many people are working for you?
For sure. So I'll give you a bit of background on how we started the company and where we came from. As I mentioned, we previously co-founded a different technology company, and after leaving that company, we were on the outlook for a new industry to essentially, apply our knowledge on the technology side, but also to help that industry maybe move forward. And we came across logistics, and really in logistics, what really interested us were planes. And so what we started, not so much the trucking side, not so much the shipping side, right? So I think we all shared that probably here. And so what we started doing was essentially doing mini internships with freight forwarding companies to get a better understanding of essentially, what their everyday challenges were in this industry. And as part of that, we came across a process one day, sitting at a freight forwarder's office in Frankfurt airport, and seeing how they booked a shipment. They had received a request from a shipper to basically ship 470 kilos of milk powder from Frankfurt to Shanghai. And he opened his Outlook email program and started blind copying a number of airlines and general sales agents to inquire for capacities and for rates. And so that really intrigued us because, as I mentioned, we didn't come from the industry and we knew kind of the passenger side of things, where you go online, you book your flights, and that's how it works, right? And so that process was really far from what we had expected. And we started kind of digging deeper. We asked more freight forwarders about how they book their everyday cargo and kind of the short term, and then started inquiring how airlines were selling. And we saw that it was the same process of emails going back and forth, a lot of phone calls going back and forth to kind of come to an agreement on rate, but also to inquire about capacity information. That's how cargo.one starts, basically.
A real sophisticated system that you had to compete with, huh?
Well, it's grown, and we've seen this in many other industries, right? That's how it was, and so we thought maybe there is a way to take a bit of that process and to help both sides to meet digitally, and to on one hand to have airlines sell their capacities more effectively, and on the other hand to allow freight forwarders to just input a search parameter and to get all the availabilities and rates that are out there. And that's how cargo.one started. We've developed since then. That was in early 2018. We by now serve a number of airlines in Europe and across the globe that sell their capacities on cargo.one. On the other hand, we serve around 950 local freight forwarder offices that book their capacities on the platform.
Yeah.
And the team has grown to about 40 people, and we're continuing to grow, in particular in times like these, where our service seems to fulfill a lot of the requirements that are out there right now, as everything is very moving and fluid.
Can I ask you something? Obviously, before the crisis and everything, did you or were you aware of people like using your platform just to see what capacity was available so that they could then go directly to the carrier and focus on a spot rate or their own negotiations?
Well, I think to kind of answer that, we need to look at what we offer. So cargo.one offers spot rates. So we've worked with airlines to offer spot rates, meaning there's no real reason for someone to kind of check, a standard rate or a contractual rate to then go around and inquire for a spot rate. So that doesn't really happen. And there is a number of other features on the platform which really help us to kind of have the booking on the platform, but then add value to the freight forwarder as they continue. So everything that is being booked through us is also being tracked in our central tracking hub. So you have an overview of all your bookings with all the airlines we work with. You can make those available to team members, essentially, to kind of share insights there. You can update and modify your bookings on cargo.one. So there's a lot of reason to, once you've actually looked for a quote and you found something that you like, not to go around and to book elsewhere, but to do it on the platform.
Okay. Can I ask you another question? As far as data credibility and having the best information available to give to the carrier for capacity optimization, planning, etc., does it cater for that as well? So, like, ready for carriage criteria?
So we, as part of the booking process, we collect information from the freight forwarder placing that booking on what kind of cargo it is, of course, whether it's already been secured, is it consolidated, all these kinds of things that help the carrier to better plan ahead. Another thing that we allow on the platform is for freight forwarders to also cancel their bookings. And that seems a bit counterintuitive, but we all know that no-shows are a big problem in this industry. So, having an easy way to cancel something is much better for the airline in the long run, because they will know whether something will show up or not. So there's a lot of smaller things that we try to do to help airlines, on one hand, to have a better view on what is being booked and how to handle it. On the other hand, to help freight forwarders make a good decision on what they want.
And the criteria that you found for no-show or cancelling, is that because of the fact that maybe the forwarder who's looking for the rate doesn't actually have the business secured, or just that there might have been a better or a different offer somewhere else?
Look, I think there's always reasons, right? And I think this is an industry-wide issue that a lot of airlines have tried to tackle, that a lot of freight forwarders try to tackle. One hand, you have the shipper, right? The shipper might not always commit to the freight forwarder, meaning the freight forwarder will have already inquired for a rate and then maybe place the booking to then hear back from the shipper. On the other hand, it is sometimes the case, obviously, that freight forwarders are trying to secure capacities, but that is very much the same on the platform as it is anywhere else in the industry when you do it over phone or email, where we see the same processes.
Yeah. So from a technology and from an innovator's and entrepreneur's perspective, it must be frustrating to see how antiquated and how much wasted time goes into the entire process.
I think we see it as an opportunity rather than being frustrated. I think there is massive opportunity for both sides of the marketplace to just get a lot more efficient, and to then in turn be able to concentrate on stuff that actually adds value. There is no value creation in matching an email with a booking and the other way around. But there is a lot of value for a freight forwarder to be able to serve their shippers in a more hands-on and supportive manner, and for airlines to concentrate on shipments that they can't be processed digitally, and where the freight forwarder actually needs consultation. So instead of facilitating really simple processes manually, which take a lot of time, I think we free up space for people to concentrate on value-adding things.
And you also cover, things like undeclared dangerous goods and various restricted items that should or should not be allowed, whether it's passenger or cargo aircraft only.
So what we do is with cargo.one, we focus on general cargo, which the majority of cargo in the market, and we're now adding more and more products. Next product that we're currently adding is pharma, to kind of help freight forwarders also book that. But the deeper you go, and the more specialized it becomes, the more fragmented the market becomes, and the more everybody has their own little standards.
Yep.
IATA has set standards for DGR, for example, but airlines will have their own special handling codes and all of that. So to really kind of get that into a unified front end to the freight forwarder, to then in the background to all the logic, is a lot of work for us to kind of come up with. And we're doing this product by product, basically working with freight forwarders to understand, hey, what would you like to book, for us to then enable that with our airline partners.
Okay, very good. Now, something obviously we can't. Well, it's just impossible to overlook what's going on at the moment. Now, I would imagine with a lot of the technology guys that are working for you, to be working from home isn't a major issue.
No, so it's really not, to be honest. I mean, we're doing this over Zoom. Zoom is a standard technology we've always been using. Everything we do is as you say, like based on the cloud, meaning, you know, there is no problem to access information or to work from literally anywhere in the world. The only problem we have is time zones, really. And so it hasn't been a major obstacle for us, or even a major, you know, difference in how we work. But what we also see, and I think this goes for anyone, human contact is important for those people developing technology. And so we've come up with a lot of initiatives like digital lunches, where people join in a video conference to have lunch together in the team, or coffee breaks, or we have the video room open all day, which people can just drop in and see whether anyone else is there to just have a quick chat, because these human interactions you lose, right? As it works from home. And we've tried to make it as fun as possible, while at the other hand also kind of encouraging collaboration, and not to have everyone just do their own thing.
No, exactly. And with everything that you've seen and found over the years that you've been doing this, have you thought of doing an awareness or a training program for forwarders so that they're able to enhance the supply chain with the carriers and interface with the shippers? Because the amount of time I've been in the business, I sometimes just think to myself, you know, who's actually, is it the tail of the dog wagging the dog, or the dog wagging the tail, or whoever's got the lead on the dog? It seems to be, you know, ever changing, and depending on what the market cycles are like, it's quite, you know, it's confusing. But it could be a lot simpler if the shipper took more focus on the upstream quality and expectations that they wanted for the entire duration of their product.
I mean, it's a large industry, right? And to change a large industry always takes a lot. I think that's the basic principle here. It is hard to say who needs to move where. I think what we've been trying to do is to educate ourselves about the industry, but also to help our customers understand what technology can do for them. And so a while back, we've initiated a program at cargo.one that is called Co-working at cargo.one, where for 1 week we invite one of our customers to just come over to Berlin to be with us in the office. They will continue doing their normal work, but we will use this time to have a bit more of a personal exchange, and we will run workshops with them to understand, hey, what are you looking for in technology? What are you looking for in a platform like cargo.one to, you know, make your life easier, but make your customers' lives better? On the other hand, we will ask them what they think of our ideas, and this way we try to collaboratively come up with new ideas. And I think that has proven to be incredibly efficient on one hand, but also insightful for both sides to kind of, you know, move this industry along, and for us to learn about the industry specifics, and for our customers to learn about what technology can do for them.
Yeah. So if I was to say to you, you had a magic wand, what 3 things would you change if you could tomorrow?
That's a good question. I think one thing for sure that we've seen is that the mindset that persists in a lot of the industry is that technology is this big black hole, and, you know, to move anything along, it needs to be $1 million project. And I'd love to see a bit more of a can-do attitude sometimes, where it's about, you know, trying small things and moving those along to learn as we go, and then to build on top of it. I think that's the major obstacle we've seen with airlines, with freight forwarders, with shippers, with anyone in the industry, because the past projects have always been this huge kind of, you know, 2-year planning to spend $6 million on then implementing something. And by the time you've implemented something, It is already outdated. You probably spec'd it a bit too far from what the use case was. You try to incorporate all the edge cases, and you end up with this massive, really slow thing. And so, step by step, I think developing stuff is a much better way of doing that. On the other hand, I think it's this notion of using technology as a facilitator and not being scared of it as per se, but to see it as an enabler, right? And we see ourselves very much as someone who wants to collaborate with existing players, whether it's freight forwarders, shippers, whether it's airlines, and not so much as a disruptor. And I think there is this misconception around this. So again, that's a mindset thing that we tend to see.
No, I think that's a valid point, and I think the situation that we're in now, it's going to force technology, digitization, and quite rightly so. And I think people are not going to be able to put it off or have the big projects because this new normal is going to be very different. It's going to be whoever has cash is king. Margins are going to matter. They're going to be a lot more agile, have to be agile, because I think there's going to be a lot of stop-starts in the business now. So technology is going to be so important.
But what we've also seen is that people have become a lot more receptive to technology and using it. I remember talking to crowds back in 2017, 18, and they said, look, this is a people's business. We can only do this manually and over the phone. And I think over the past 3 months, people have suddenly realized what it can mean to make use of platforms like cargo.one, but technology in general, right? And become much more open to using it. We've seen that there's massive increases in usage on the platform just because from home, it's much easier suddenly, to have everything in one rather than to do it over the phone, which sits in your office and you might not even be reachable and stuff like that, where we see a product market fit for technology increasing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't know if you've seen the video that's gone round of a group of people who have they've done a live performance of video conferencing.
Oh, really? No, I haven't.
It's very, very, very funny.
Yeah.
It's got things where, they're all sitting in the room, but somebody's going, oh, no, sorry, there's a bit of disruption on the line. Sorry. And then they're actually looking at something else. And so I think one of the things that will come with it is a little bit like a new code of conduct or a code of practice, because certain things, won't be tolerated and certain things will be well known and, people will have to behave in a very, very different manner. So, but it's definitely changing and quite rightly so that it changes. Now, I've got to refer to the painting behind you. So we had a quick one just before you. Just tell me again, what does it say on the picture?
On the bottom of the picture, it's a New York bus station, and on the bottom of the picture it says "Holding out for better times." And so lately, I've been looking at that and kind of felt very much belonging to that group of people on the picture.
It's incredible, though, how this has affected every single person's outlook and approach. And one of the things that you mentioned there about people becoming more receptive to technology. From whether people are having family quizzes, they're having virtual barbecues, virtual parties, whatever. Everybody is becoming more comfortable with it. And obviously it's going to stay a lot longer. So, there's going to be I think there's going to be a big challenge now with when people are expecting to come back and thinking that it's going to go back to the way it was. It's never going to be the same again.
No, I don't think it's going to be the same again. I think on one hand, that's good in some parts because it's good that we move on and that there is movement. Maybe it's a bit of a forced movement now, but I think that's good. On the other hand, I think we might also lose things that we valued in the past that might just be gone now. And so I think it's finding that balance, between moving forward as an industry, but also as human society. While on the other hand, not losing track of what you've achieved and what you've done and what also defines us.
No, exactly. Now, as far as the business side of things, everybody is probably aware, and especially I took the dogs for a walk this morning, and I just heard one plane, and I looked up and I could see exactly whose plane it was and what the aircraft was. but there are still aircrafts moving. Are you doing much now with freighters and special charters?
Yes. So, I mean, we've been lucky to have a number of airlines on the platform that operate freighters, whether it's an Etihad, Lufthansa, an Average Cargo, Nippon Cargo Airways. So we have this, constant supply, and had this constant supply throughout all the different parts of the crisis, whether it was China, Italy, then Central Europe, now the US. So that really helped us. What we've also been doing is work really closely with our airline partners to bring on their PAX freighters, essentially, those, the new definition of freighters, and onto the platform to be able to help them sell capacity on those. And again, I think this is where technology becomes, like the advantages become really apparent, right? You're not trying to distribute flight plans that change by the hour in static files anymore, rate information that changes by the minute, capacity information that changes by the minute. We have live access to the core systems of our airline partners, meaning we always know what is remaining in terms of capacity, what is the extra rate we need to sell at, which flights are going where. And so that has helped us tremendously.
And you mentioned about the passenger aircrafts, and I've heard people now calling them freighters.
Freighters, yes, I heard
freighters. That. Yeah, so it's very creative now. So the freighters. I mean, are you surprised at how quickly the industry was able to adapt?
To an extent, yes, I am, to be honest. I think it's amazing to see. To be honest, I think that the past 6 weeks have been an amazing effort by the entire industry to come together, to work together against all odds, really, to just make things happen. And you see airlines now that remove their entire kind of seats from freighters to make them available for cargo. And I think yes, this only comes to show the industry is able to adapt. It is able to move fast if it only wants, and it is able to do that for the better. And I think, to be honest, it's been a great achievement over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, it has. And it's also, you have to take your hat off to, well, firstly, the frontline care workers who put their lives on the line for everybody. So it's hugely a lot of respect for them. But also, everybody that's involved in keeping the supply chain going, just doing basic things that people never even looked at before, from ambulance, fire brigades, working in supermarkets, pharmacies, the refuse, all those people keep life going. Yes. And I think they're all going to get an awful lot more credit and respect after this when we come out into a new normal than ever before, and justly so, because people that everybody looked up to and thought were fantastic, they're basically entertainers, sports people, etc., but not heroes. Yeah. And I think the definition of hero will also have a new normal and a respectful one. So I think
that's the outcome, of this whole situation. I think that's at least light in the end of the tunnel, to see that happening and to see the change in perception of these kinds of jobs and services.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful thing to see the way people now respect each other a little bit more. It appears to be, but also the way they respect everybody else. So maybe it'll be a better time, but at some cost. Now, with regards to people when they come back, are you apprehensive of the anxieties that will come back and the impact that it will have on carriers when the normal staff come back to do some of the work and some of the jobs that you rely on for the efficiencies and the standards that you're selling?
Look, I think, we've worked with many airlines prior to the crisis, right? And I think we have a very good relationship with them. We've tried to support wherever we can now during this crisis when people had to go home and offices weren't functioning anymore. But in the end, we're a service provider, bringing together demand and supply. And we need both demand and supply to work with us and to be happy with our service as much as possible to facilitate that process. And I'm very confident that once everybody comes back and we kind of establish this new normal, we'll see some changes for sure, I think, and that's necessary. On the other hand, I think we'll see a lot of the old kind of habits coming back and being reestablished as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And now something that's a little bit of a conundrum for many, e-commerce.
Yes.
Okay, so you've got your traditional parties who are experts. And then you've got the supply chain, the carrier, the GHA, the forwarder. They don't really know what to do or how they fit in with the e-commerce product, but it still travels, and it travels normally. So are you seeing a huge increase in that level?
I'd like to see a lot more, to be honest, for the air cargo community. I think a lot of it has been captured by other players, integrators, express carriers. Yeah. That could have been captured by the air cargo industry. But I think, to be frank, I think the industry has been too slow to react to this movement, not as fast as they were now with COVID-19. Which has resulted in the fact that there were options that were preferred. And I think it really comes down to speed and transparency, right? I think what e-commerce needs is speed first and foremost, but transparency. And so when I look at tracking information every once in a while, and there's massive holds where just like no information is to be found for a specific shipment, that doesn't work. And if I need 3 days to make a booking for an e-commerce shipment, that also doesn't work, because those 3 days I need to take to actually deliver to the recipient. And so I think there is a massive opportunity for carriers to capture that part of the market, but I also do think there is still a long way to go for a lot of them to really make use of that.
Yeah, and what you mentioned now about tracking and transparency. How do you feel the Cargo IQ messaging is working?
I think it's a big step forward. I think it helps to at least set a standard and give transparency on the milestones themselves. I think the problem lies one level deeper, and that is the actual tracking of each individual AWB, right? The standard is only as good as the information you feed it. And so to be able to actually have an individual tracking of each individual shipment, or at least on an AWB basis, will happen or will need to happen at one point to make sure that we have this level of transparency. Maybe not for all shipments, but certainly for shipments that are e-commerce or kind of
pharmaceutical. Yeah. Yeah. No, very good. And now, where do you see yourselves either developing or migrating to or transitioning to as a result of the crisis we're in, but also as a result of an innovative approach to where you'd like to take the product, and in a much shorter period of time?
Yeah. So I think it's a good question. And to be honest, we see this very much as an accelerator for us right now. And what we've seen is that airlines, are suddenly approaching us because they don't have means of distribution anymore. Their offices are closing. They can't handle requests coming in from freight forwarders. So what this has led to is basically an increased inbound traffic from airlines. And so we're increasing the team to handle that on one hand. On the other hand, we've also seen that it increased the product market fit on the freight forwarder side. And so what is paramount for us is, on one hand, to help our partners that already are partners right now. So we've increased our staff on those teams to make sure that we can handle those new use cases that are coming up due to COVID-19. But what we've also tried to do is to up our integration capabilities, for example. So we've added staff to our technical integration teams to make sure that airlines that we are now partnering with can be integrated as quickly as possible. And so I think going forward, what is paramount to us is having as many airlines on the platform as possible. For freight forwarders requests, and what we're seeing is that with each individual airline that we're adding hundreds of new users on the freight forwarder side, which adds to this marketplace, right? And more offers are coming in, more requests are being filled, and it's this network effect which benefits both sides on the platform.
Okay, and another thing that's always interested me, when you go online and you try and book a flight, you book a ticket.
Yeah.
And you look at it and it says 6 seats left, and people think, oh my God, I better get in there quick because there's only 6 seats left. And then as soon as those 6 seats are gone, there's another group of 12 seats that come up at a different price.
Yeah.
Now that sort of, whether you want to call it artificial pricing or pressure-driven pricing or whatever, does that also play a part in the way you see things moving forward?
I don't think so. And I think there's a massive difference between what we see on the passenger side versus what we see on the cargo side. And the difference here is that on the passenger side, for the most case, we are dealing with inexperienced, non-professional buyers, right? And so if you see a budget airline like Ryanair drop their prices to €2 to somewhere in Europe, and suddenly people will take that flight and just go to that place, that's because people don't actually, they're not professional buyers. They don't actually have to go somewhere. They're just buying because they can, essentially. On the cargo side, that's much different, right? We have professional buyers. There is a transparency in the market, even though airlines tend to say, look, no one knows our pricing, but freight forwarders know, right? They will call out airlines and they will have that transparency. And so I don't think there's the same mechanics that we can employ and that we want to use to drive that kind of behavior. I would rather look from a value creation perspective, right? What can we do to help airlines position products or quality better on a platform like cargo.one, right? Where they can say, hey, we have an on-time performance, or we have this kind of tracking ability or something like that. And to give freight forwarders more of qualitative metrics to...
Yeah, very good, very good, yeah. And you think that's the way to go forward, yeah?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, with regards to the qualitative element, and you look at the way the prices have gone now on chartering an aircraft over the last few months and the values, okay, and obviously people who are not familiar with the industry, they might look at that with a little bit of anger in one eye, but it's a fact of life. Now, those price increases are phenomenal at the moment.
Phenomenal. Absolutely. Not just on charters, also on some of obviously, we keep track of that, and we've seen phenomenal increases on some routes that were temporarily really constrained. And obviously, that is normal. That's demand and supply.
Demand and supply, yeah.
Drives the price. I think there needs to be caution as to whether and how we want to profit off this situation as an airline, as a freight forwarder. And when I see charter prices going up tenfold, that is obviously doable because there's enough demand and supply is little. But I think there's also a general responsibility to not overdo it in these times of crisis, and to stick together and to enable global trade as we need it, not to profit off disasters. Yeah.
And I think there's a fine balance, but obviously people will start looking at it as they become a little bit wiser and a little bit more, frustrated with the way the situation is, because at the end of the day, you don't want any shortages because of being priced out of the market, which would not make sense. Exactly. So, especially with PPE and everything coming in. Now, another thing that I never took much notice of before, but I do now, is I've watched so many programs now where it looks at the cost of producing something in one country as opposed to closer to home.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also look at the standards that are applied closer to home as opposed to further away.
Mm-hmm.
And in most cases, it's because the standards are lesser or different further away, and the governance over workers and various different twists and turns and flexibilities are a little bit more easier, and that then results in the price. So in the past, and I say the past because all our yesterdays are never going to be like our tomorrows again. So in the past, everything was cost, and it was a throwaway society. Do you think that might change now in the future, and there'll be a shift and a redistribution so that people are a little bit more sustainable without having to rely on certain markets for such a high proportion of their goods and their products?
Look, I think we've all come to realize over the past couple of weeks that life can be very different, and it can still work on very different terms. And I think not being able to travel as much as we used to. I mean, we were all on planes every week essentially.
Yeah,
that hasn't happened, and I think a lot of other things haven't happened. How this is going to pan out in the future, I don't know, to be honest. But certainly, I think there is an element of risk for the global trade community and air freight in particular, that looking at more sustainable and maybe longer term, more sustainable kind of solutions, nearshoring might impact this industry. And I think what we'll see is that players will have to adapt, and that there will need to be focus on offering sustainable solutions as a mode of transport. And we've seen a lot of players starting to look into sustainability and how we can reduce CO2 footprints and all of that, which I think are initiatives which we need to continue doing in order to stay a viable option in global trade.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think there'll be a big shift now to things that people thought you just talked over when you're out on a Friday or a Saturday night at a dinner party or whatever, or when you've had a few too many. But I think it's going to become a lot more of a concentrated political platform now moving forward. And I think it's probably right, because too few places had too much reliance and too fragile. So I think it has to change. Okay. It has to change. Now, carriers that will be a little bit more advanced and astute than others, are you trying to influence or help them with certain technology to have certain forecast capability or, a reallocation of capacity?
Certainly. So I think what we offer to our airline partners is a lot of insight into the market, essentially, right? To help them steer capacities, but to also be able to fill, the remainder of available capacities on each flight. And so we do that by providing data, essentially. We have data products that we make available to our partner airlines, which help them to better steer either their sales activity or their pricing activity within competition and antitrust guidelines, of course. On the other hand, we're also help them innovate products where we give them information and feedback on how the market perceives the different products. That comes as far as talking about sustainability, helping them to come up with products that might incorporate something like a CO2 offset on the platform and things like that. So what our partners can use cargo.one for is really to use us as the forefront of innovation, something they couldn't do on their own platform or with their own stuff, because it's difficult to sometimes brief everyone and to implement it. With us, they can do it, they can try it, they can see how it works, and then they can either roll it out or they can take it back.
And do you do that as part of your natural, your natural workload, or do you have like an innovation lab where you've got a few key members of staff who all they're doing is focusing on innovations and change?
So, we're still a small team. We have what we call the product team, and the product team is really focused on building out the platform and the products that we have on this platform, right? And one of their tasks is to essentially scout ideas, to bounce those ideas off of our customers, whether it's freight forwarders or airlines, to come to the conclusion of whether something they came up with makes sense or not. Everything we develop, though, is always co-developed with our customers. So we wouldn't go and start building something to then say, hey, we built this, do you like it? But we would always, from the get-go, invite a couple of our customers to help co-develop something. And this way, we make sure that on the one hand, we're driving the process, and we see things obviously that are different than a customer would see them. That's natural. Yeah. We have a vantage point. On the other hand, though, we're not building products that our customers or the community wouldn't want to use.
And are you seeing now a positive wave of more collaboration and people trying to grow the cake instead of fighting over a slice?
I think in general we've seen this. To be honest, though, with our customers, it's always been a very collaborative approach. We've never thought about different locations or any of that. I think everyone that joins a platform like cargo.one and thus a young company believes in moving forward, moving the industry forward, becoming more customer centric, and so we've seen a lot of collaboration.
And when I say collaboration, now I'm also talking about grouping your customers together. So do you have like tripartite or a group exercise whereby there's mutual changes that maybe 4 or 5 customers are dealing with, and then maybe 3 are dealing with a couple of more advanced ones and the others aren't? Do you try and encourage that that group concept?
So as far as we're permitted, and as far as as antitrust makes this work, and it doesn't always, unfortunately, and we also do that. But as far as does, we try to do exactly that, right? We try to take our customers and to move them forward as a whole. We try to obviously build bridges where there needs to be bridges, and obviously there's different levels of advancement between different customers. And so what we try to do is we always try to have a unified product to the customer, whether it's airlines or freight forwarders, but how we do this in the back end with the different players always varies and is always a customized approach.
Okay, very good. Now, we're almost near the end. So one of the questions I'd like to ask you now is, all of your personnel, your team, the 40, roughly 40 people, what's their biggest concern at the moment about the new tomorrow?
Look, I think that their biggest concern is, I would guess, we would have to ask them, but my guess would be to be able to really judge what's ahead of us. I think we're in a situation right now where a lot of countries have started shutting down social distancing. We're on very kind of low production levels, and it's very hard to really see when it's going to pick up again and how it's going to pick up again, and is this going to be June, July, fall next year, and with that sentiment comes a lot of uncertainty that people need to deal with, whether it's financial uncertainties or production forecasters kind of uncertainties, all of that, and to deal with that, I think adds to everyone's everyday workload and everybody's already cramped schedules, and so I would guess having more visibility into what's going to happen would help everyone. But
it's an incredible timer. I watched the program with Bill Gates, 5 years ago, when he gave his speech about pandemic and what people should do, and it seems trivial now, the amount of money he was looking at from global sources to look at it, and now God knows how many multiples of money has been spent when people could have and should have done things a lot sooner. Now, as far as business continuity, contingency and risk, how do you see the industry that you've chosen to go into? Do you see it as being as focused and as aware as it should be?
I think yes. And I think one of the reasons is that this industry has always dealt with crises, whether it's macroeconomic or microeconomic crises. And so I think what we've seen is way before everybody else was talking about the impacts of COVID-19 onto the whole world, I think this industry already had a pretty good understanding of what was going to hit us. And so what I think we've seen is that a lot of players are well prepared for what's going to come. On the passenger side, I think it's obviously a tragedy, and then we see none of those flights going. And I think naturally we will see that this is going to hit some players harder. Those that were focused on cargo see that cargo now adds a lot to their bottom line and then keeps them afloat, which is good. But generally, I think I'm quite happy and I'm quite positive about what I'm seeing in the industry as to how people deal with it and kind of move forward.
Yeah, it's one of the few times where cargo's not the ugly duckling. It's amazing, huh?
It's true, and it's been interesting for us. I mean, we've only come to the industry 3 years ago, and when we started coming to the industry, friends and people we had worked with asked us, "What are you doing in air cargo? What's air cargo really?" Right? Over the past 3 months, suddenly air cargo has become this hot thing. Everybody's talking about. Everybody knows this is needed. Like global trade depends on this, and so it's been very interesting also for our team to kind of go through this process.
Yeah. But it's a great industry. I mean, when you think for a short period of time, we're the landlords or the shopkeepers of the world's produce and everything.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Let's make the most of it.
Well, yeah, in the right way. Yeah. Now, Moritz, listen, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, I know a little bit. Well, I know a lot more than I did before, and I've really enjoyed meeting you, listening to what you've done, and long may you continue to be innovative and have that entrepreneurial spirit. And I wish you great success, and all the staff that are associated with you and the work that you're doing. Brilliant. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.